is they want that one video that's going to go viral and blow them up. That's all they want. They want that. I just want one video that's going to make me a superstar overnight. But when you train jiu-jitsu for a long time, or when you lifted weights for a long time, you know that nothing happens overnight. Nothing's going to be quick.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down once again with the legend himself, Daniel Strauss. A quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Bubs Naturals and AG1 here behind me. To take advantage of discounts on these products, simply click the show notes. They are staples in my daily health and wellness routine, and I'm stoked to be able to share them with you. If you want to see this podcast grow in 2024, do me a solid. Take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. This helps tremendously by placing the show organically in front of other people that find value in strength and conditioning, jiu-jitsu, and human performance. The other way that you can support the show is simply by sharing it with a friend. Daniel Strauss is a Jiu Jitsu Black Belt under Roger Gracie. He has fought in ADCC, EBI, Polaris, and Quintet promotions, earning himself legendary status with his unique style and ape-like grip. Daniel can be heard on the Raspberry Ape podcast, as well as in the color commentary booth for Cage Warriors in the United Kingdom. I had an absolute blast on this episode. I got to address very few things that I intended to in the beginning, but I know that you will enjoy it as much as I did. Without further ado, Daniel Strauss. Daniel Strauss back again. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. I had so much fun the last time that we chatted, and I've been mulling around with different questions and things that I want to pitch your way. So to do it again in front of someone who looks as cool as you do right now means a lot, man. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back. I'm not sure cool or not. I feel like it was Steven Segal who sort of was first wearing the sort of orange yellow glasses, and we thought that he was crazy. And then all of this blue light blocking stuff came out, and now he looks like some sort of pioneer.
Was he trolling people, or do you think that he was aware of the like biohacker benefits?
Who knows? You'll never find out.
What are your thoughts on Steven Seagal? Actually, random starting point. Didn't expect us to go here, but I was just watching a clip with him the other day in someone's training camp, martial artist. And I'm like, it's so interesting. This guy, he kind of like weaves his way into different martial artist camps, or his presence at different UFC events. But a lot of the shtick is like, it's phony karate martial arts that everyone doesn't really buy into.
I think no one takes him seriously. He's just a bit of a joke in the real fighting world. But there are some, look, the guy has led an interesting life. And at the end of the day, that's all that matters, right? He's got a cool story to tell.
And he gets.
And if you want to see a really cool story, I'll start with a recommendation nice and early.
Please.
For both an excellent story involving Steven Seagal, which was when he got beaten up by Jean LaBelle. Do you know about the story?
In a sanctioned bout, or this was like a Dojo Storm style?
This was behind the scenes at some movie that Gene was either stuntman in or helping with the stuntman in. No. I'm not going to tell the story.
Okay, you don't want to ruin it. Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you where you want to hear the story, which is a YouTuber who I believe to be the greatest YouTuber in the world, who is criminally underrated and underknown, and goes by the name Bobby Fingers.
Bobby Fingers
puts out a video once every 6 months if you're lucky, and he makes dioramas and he tells tales. And his
sounds like a Guy Ritchie character.
His second episode is about Jean LaBelle and Steven Seagal. So that's all I'll say. Go check out Bobby Fingers. That's my first.
It really sounds.
Recommendation.
I swear that guy's in Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. It sounds like a character.
Yeah, there
right
is a character like
movie.
him. Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. In honor of martial arts lore, I will investigate this further as I find it important. There are so many different ways that I thought that we could take this conversation, and continuing from the last time that we spoke last year, and trying our best not to double down on things we've already talked about. Although I
Sure.
did go back and listen to it, and I love that conversation. I think it's evergreen. And if anyone's interested in strength and conditioning and unconventional views or reshaping how you think about physical fitness and its application to sports, specifically grappling, I think it's an incredible episode. But I wanted to start with kind of a hypothetical. And if we could basically, in a vacuum, build me, and we can do this from multiple levels, build me the ideal grappler. And we can talk about mindset, of course, as that's a big part of it. Things like dealing with injury like you did, and not walking away from the sport, finding a way to stay in it. But also from a strengths requirement, what is the fluff? What are things that are necessary? What should people be doing from the hobbyist level, maybe all the way to the professional level? And then we can kind of shape this avatar of the most aggressive, best of all time grappler.
It's a very good question. It's a very interesting question, and unfortunately, as I usually do, I'm not going to give a particularly simple answer. I think the question the question is, it's a good question, but straight off the bat, I don't think that there is a simple answer like that. And I actually think that that's almost the beauty of jiu-jitsu. I think with a lot of other sports, if you were talking about the perfect sprinter, if you were talking about the perfect swimmer, if you were talking about the perfect long distance runner, and even some other sports, the perfect boxer and stuff like that, I think that it's a lot easier for you to create that perfect individual. And one of the things that I like so much about grappling is how adaptable it is to everyone. You see people at the top of their sport, and some of them, like, there is no body shape that is indicative of an elite level grappler. Not even in different weight classes. Some are stocky, some are super long, some are in between. Some are massively into strength and conditioning. Others don't seem to be especially at the lower weights, don't seem to be as involved in it. So I think it's very, very difficult to create that perfect grappler, because I think the perfect grappler can change with the times. I think grappling changes as well. I think the perfect grappler of 10 years ago is going to look different to the perfect grappler of today, just because of how the sport has evolved and how the sport looks. And I think the perfect grappler in 10 years' time is going to look even different to the perfect grappler today. Yeah.
It's interesting on that point. I was going back and watching some old UFC fights on YouTube. I think it was UFC 100, which is crazy to think that that's almost 200 fights ago. And the build of these guys was just different. The way that they moved was different.
Completely different.
So night and day from. I liken it to the athleticizing of martial arts. You see the prerequisites of these guys as they're getting into the UFC. It's an unbelievable book of accomplishments, right? They're all like D1 wrestlers. They have previous sport experience. They're coming in truly as an athlete. Whereas you look at the UFC 100, these guys are just brawlers. Like, you picked them out of a bar and you put them in the octagon and they fought each other. And it's not that long ago, but it is a big difference in the physical demands of the sport, how that changes the physiology of the athletes. When you think back to when you were really in the heyday of your competition, what are some of those changes that you've witnessed over let's call it a 10, 15-year period in grappling?
Yeah, I think, and you're right. And, talking about UFC 100, even though it was certainly a couple of eras ago, it's still relatively modern. I mean, we start to look back at UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Zuffa, early Zuffa, UFC 30, 40, 50, very, very different builds, very, very different ways that these guys move, very different ways that these guys fight. And it's the same for Jiu-Jitsu. If you look at ADCC from 20 years ago, it looks very different to ADCC today. Or even 10 years ago, it looks very different to today. And a big part of that is an increase in the athleticism. I still don't think that MMA or grappling, essentially, when you have a freak athlete in a population, they're going to go to the sport that pays the most. So in the United States, for example, these guys are going to be basketball players or NFL players. They're not gonna go to a sport that really isn't a very smart sport to do. I mean, MMA let's be real here, you know. Let's be honest. I mean, I've become very aware of this fact, working closely in the MMA industry. You know, I've been following MMA for as long as I've been doing martial arts, almost 20 years now. But I've been working for the last 4.5 years within the industry, working as a commentator for Cage Warriors. And within that, I've been able to see the inside of the industry. Not quite at the level of the UFC, but, you know, the biggest, essentially,
Still
you know,
top
biggest stage in
contenders
Europe. And
yeah,
exactly. And that, you know, that's how, if you're in Europe and you want to go to UFC, you go through Cage Warriors. So we're looking at the level just below UFC. And it really starts to hit home the seriousness of the sport and just how brutal it is. And I mean, a really great example that everyone, I don't know whether it's just me, but I feel like a lot of people from the weekend just gone and watching Volkanovski. There's something about Volkanovski where he's such a down-to-earth guy, and he's such a great character in the sport, where you almost feel like you're watching your mate fight.
totally.
And so when he wins, you feel good about yourself. Yep. And watching him get finished on the weekend in the way that he did, you just look at it and go, fuck, this sport will chew people up and spit them out. And if you're a freak athlete in a country that has other sports that you can make way more money with way less of the risk, that's where they're going to go. But as MMA has gotten bigger, and indeed as grappling gets bigger, they're going to attract more and more of those higher level athletes. The top freak athletes are still going to go to the sort of NFL and sports that are going to pay them much more for less damage. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you're in Europe and you have the opportunity to go play club team soccer, like,
yep,
that's kind of a no-brainer, right? I mean, maybe you face some knee or ankle injuries over a 15, 20-year career, maybe. But if you're really good, you're going to get paid. You're going to have a wonderful lifestyle, a great balance, and a ton of people around you making sure that you're always being taken care of. In martial arts, the second that you're in value or not valuable, you're kind of gone. And this weekend, it's so crazy watching this last weekend. Like, you kind of see in someone like Ilya, I think, to your point, because he kind of feels like your mate, you almost discredit the work ethic and how truly talented Volkanovski really is, because he comes off as kind of the everyman. You're like, I could find myself in a gym training next to this guy. Just looking at Ilya's performance, you kind of go like, wow, this guy could be playing other sports too, and he chose not to. And he's here, and you are seeing that athletic style of the sports professional choosing to go the martial arts route. But how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of athletes have been churned out by that same system? You know, there aren't bench riders in MMA. You can't go and play like sub-pro soccer and make a pretty decent living. Like, if you're not in the main promotion and fighting and winning, you're not making money at all.
Yeah, 100%. And you're not making the money, you're not living the lifestyle, but you're taking the same amount of damage, you know? You have a career that never quite gets it to the top, and you're still going to get chewed up and spat out. You're just not going to have any of the compensation. So MMA is a very brutal sport, and I mean, I feel like us as fans, I mean, I don't want to shit on MMA fans too much, but you know, as it's gone mainstream, the bigger something gets, the more of the riff-raff, we could say, get involved. But I do find MMA fans to be some of the most despicable fans of any sort of sports space that I've ever seen. The way that they turn on fighters, the way that they treat fighters, is kind of insane. And I think that we kind of allow people to just watch MMA as purely a sport, where really it should be seen as something quite different. It should be seen as, these guys are really ruining their lives long term, let's be honest, for entertainment. And a lot of them won't get great compensation from it. And I think that that as fans, we have to make sure that we don't forget that, because it's not like a lot of other sports, boxing and MMA and those sports where you're getting hit in the head. That's bad shit.
It's such a good point, and we haven't seen the generation age out yet either. You know, we're still in the midst of discovering how bad the bad really is. Like, you have a century of boxing where you've seen these guys get older. And in the case of, for example, Muhammad Ali, it's horrible, right? It's extremely tragic to watch. But now we're going to have hundreds of guys who have gone through this system that's extremely brutal, right? And we don't know how that looks. When you're doing the commentation with Cage Warriors, so they've put out top contenders, right? I mean, Paddy Pimblett comes out of Cage Warriors. I believe Conor McGregor came out of Cage Warriors.
Ilia Topuria came out of Cage Warriors.
So they got big guys. Their presence here in the United States is huge too. They're doing an event in San Diego here shortly, and they put on fantastic stuff. So to go watch amateur level mixed martial arts, it's incredible. It's like watching a UFC event. You probably see thousands of these athletes, yet there's the percentage of people that really make it is so small. What's in place for those athletes? Like, can they fall back into something like grappling that's not as grappling is demanding in its own regard, but are there alternatives?
It's not demanding in the same way. The problem with grappling is that there is you can't make a living grappling. You can't make a living competing, realistically. You have to be in a fraction of 1%. There's like a handful of people whose sole source of income is competition, and maybe you have a few that have very good sponsors, that proper sponsors, not we give you clothes for free and you get a 10% discount and you get 5% of that. Not that kind of not affiliate marketing level sponsorship. I mean proper salaried sponsorship. That's kind of the only way that you can make it as a professional athlete in jiu-jitsu, and you really have to be on top of the game. And even then, you're not going to be really compensated massively heavily. But it's not as brutal as MMA at all. So you do see a lot of MMA guys towards the end of their career fall back on grappling, and it's very nice that grappling is there. Of course, I also commentate for Polaris. We see a huge crossover with high level MMA guys, both in their competitive prime. I mean, we've had former champions. We've had guys who were still, we had Aljamain Sterling on one of our recent cards. We had Chris Weidman on a card last year. We've had many great fighters on there. So it's a great space. These professional shows is a great place for retired or semi-retired or winding down their career to still have a competitive outlet, but you're not gonna make a living on professional grappling. That's just not really a reality. So you gotta be smart with it, and you've got to be placing yourself in somewhere where you can sell instructionals or own a gym or coach or whatever else it is.
Did you feel like you had to fight your way to where you are? I mean, you're a decorated competitor. You had a long career, but you also have these amazing opportunities in the announcing and commentary world, which are, I would assume, kind of scarcely existent, right? There can't be that many of the positions available, and you happen to command one well, and you have an understanding of the sport. So when you were walking away from competition, did you feel like these were available for you, or did you have to seek them out and really like tooth and nail to position yourself there?
No, the commentary, I never wanted to go into commentary. I never tried to go into commentary. But I guess I was, and I was commentating whilst, I'm still hoping to get back in the competition, and but I was commentating alongside whilst I was competing. And I never planned to do it. These are just opportunities that presented itself to me. But what I was sort of aware of relatively early on, and this is, I feel like I need to start talking, and I will put out at some point some information, because I think it's important for these up and coming grapplers to understand. Kind of on this whole point is there is kind of no such thing as a professional grappler. It's not enough. You can't make a living doing that, and even if you do, that living's going to be very shortly lived. Whatever you can scrape by. So you've got to be smart at becoming business literate and understanding how to run. Essentially, if you want to be a full-time grappler, if you don't want to have a 9 to 5, and you want to do that within the grappling world, then you need to understand that you are a brand as an individual, and that from the day that you decide that that's what you want to do, you need to be thinking about how you're building your brand. and how you're creating relationships, and how you're you're getting in front of more people, and how you're, once you get eyes on yourself, how you're curating that and how you're sustaining that, and then branching into other things. So for example, one of the things that I did that kind of started this, and this was a time where there wasn't a lot out there, was I started a podcast. And I was already, this is at a stage where I was already one of the best known grapplers in the UK. But I realized that, I mean, this isn't the reason I started the podcast, but it's something that definitely, it was a massive factor. Causation or correlation irrelevant, it was a big factor. And what I noticed was, if my name is only going to be, or if my brand is only going to be increased by competing, that's a fickle place to be. Because you win a tournament and you win a tournament and it's all good, and then you train super hard and you're in even better shape and you're even more prepared, but something goes wrong on the day and you lose a tournament next, or you lose a super fight next, and suddenly no one gives a shit about you. So you can go very long periods of time without building the brand at all. So what I realized with the podcast is, I could actually I could create value, and I could have interest, and I could continue to build my brand without having to compete. And that kind of is something that's certainly not to say that everyone needs to start a podcast. I highly recommend against it, actually, because there's already a saturation, and it's very hard to do. A lot of people start one and then they realize how difficult it is and it doesn't sustain. But that's just one example. And then through the podcast, I was able, and the podcast helped me get more work in doing seminars and stuff like that, because your notoriety is higher, so more people are interested in coming to see you teach. And also I would say that the podcast certainly had a big influence in being approached by various organizations such as Polaris and eventually Cage Warriors, and sort of to be in the position where I am now.
Yeah, it's a big incentive to, well, it's a little bit of a crux. Like, this is one of the things I find interesting about social media is on one side, being in control of your media, it gives you the opportunity to leverage yourself and create opportunities, which is great. You want if we stay in the sport of grappling, you want all grapplers to have the opportunity to create a brand for themselves, leverage that, and create a living doing what they love. And we both know that, and you way more than I, the amount of input that it takes to be good at grappling is extensive. This is 80, 90, 100% of your time is committed to getting better at this, and in many cases to no avail. And so to have something there that can help you with that is great. We want more of that. The flip side to that is that it can be a smoke and mirrors. Like, you can think that you're creating something bigger and you're creating this brand, and there comes a point where you have to have what you said, business literacy, and go, okay, I have this group of people listening to me or following me or wanting something from me. How do you actually do something with that? Is it in the form of seminars? Is it in the form of, ad revenue or something? But that's a conversation that isn't, I wouldn't imagine, commonplace in an academy when someone's like a blue belt with aspirations of becoming a professional grappler. It's the same thing that, here in the NFL, there's now people in place in the National Football League to help up and coming athletes who get these big contracts and teach them how to actually interact with the fact that now they're more than just this talented football player. Maybe there's another business opportunity there for you through Raspberry Ape to help curate business instructionals and teach people how to take care of themselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it's difficult for grappling because there's so much less money in the sport as well. So really, you're fighting over scraps in the grappling world, and that is just the reality. And it will get better. It's unlikely to get worse, but at the same time, it could get worse, because if the money invested in the sport is not proportional to the people who are participating in the sport, what you'll have is a mismatch of the ratio of up-and-coming youngsters who want to go full-time, and you'll have an oversaturation of the individuals, essentially too much of a supply and not enough of a demand in terms of money in the sport. It's what it essentially comes down to is number of people watching compared to number of people participating. Right. So when you see the UFC, a lot of people watch MMA. Not a lot of people train MMA. even fewer people compete in MMA. So the ratio of people who watch to people who are performing and competing is massively skewed in favor of the people who are competing. However, in jiu-jitsu, I can pretty much guarantee you that there are more people participating than watching, which is crazy.
Yeah. Nuts.
Most people who do jiu-jitsu, or a huge amount of people who do jiu-jitsu, have never watched jiu-jitsu. I know lots and lots. You and me are very interested in the sport, and we're interested in the high level.
Mm-hmm.
But most people who train, they don't watch it.
I mean,
that's crazy.
To hammer your point home, sorry to interrupt you, but to hammer your point home, it wasn't until I was well into like blue belt that I really watched jiu-jitsu matches, like no-gi matches, or if I was going to compete like an IBJJF tournament or something. And even then, scarce. You know, if it's a big event or it's grapplers that I tend to really gravitate towards that I think are exciting and fun, I'll watch it. But you hit the nail on the head 100%. It is such a participant-heavy sport in comparison to others. I've had this same conversation about relatability. Like anyone in the UK can go in their backyard and pick up a football and start trying to learn how to juggle. And instantaneously, Premier League soccer matches make sense because you get how hard it is to do it and how insanely talented these people are. There's no barrier to entry there. MMA has a little bit of that because you can watch people get knocked out. Everyone understands that. They can go, oh my God, that was insane. I saw something wild. You don't even have to have ever been punched in the face to recognize that that's crazy. But jiu-jitsu, if you don't practice or have an understanding of like the intricacies of grip and position and transition and then let alone the whole point system, which I don't even think most of us practitioners understand, right? It's such a gap between truly understanding it to a level where you can be involved in the viewing process and then just being someone outside of the fence.
Yeah, exactly. And that is essentially the problem. And it's one of the reasons why grapplers have to be very, we have to be very thankful and appreciate MMA, because MMA is the bridge between watchability and, from the layman and the mainstream. It's going to be a small amount of exposure to jiu-jitsu. Without MMA, jiu-jitsu would be an absolute fraction. I mean, we almost certainly wouldn't be having this conversation if MMA wasn't a sport, which is crazy to think because MMA is one of the biggest sports in the world now. But it wasn't very long ago where MMA, for many years prior, where MMA, the concept just didn't exist. There was no way for there were no scenarios outside of a street fight where you'd see someone on their back getting punched in the head by someone else 40 years ago. Just didn't happen. So jiu-jitsu is which is crazy to think about, isn't it? But jiu-jitsu is a tough sport.
They've tied a cute little bow on top of just all-out brutality, and put it on television. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. It's a marketing just juggernaut victory if anyone's ever seen one. To take that and to go up against the different athletic commissions and get it into different states and get it into different countries, build fan bases around it. I mean, to think that that's all been accomplished within a 30-year period is really, 30-year period for the UFC, not withstanding Pride and everything else, but it's really miraculous.
But we're not talking much longer. Yeah. Right, no, it is incredible. And the interesting thing to theorize about MMA, of course, because, you think about the sport is so young in the grand scheme of things. And the fact that for so many hundreds of years, all these other sports were being played and nothing even resembling MMA was really about. The interesting thing to question and theorize is MMA inevitable? Was it always going to happen eventually? Because it is the purest form of combat that exists as a sport today. It is almost pure. There are very few rules to it. We're talking headbutts, eye gouging, biting. There's a handful of them. You get the more intricate stuff, 10-2, kicks on the ground. But basically, it's pretty damn pure fighting. Anything goes. And the question is, was that inevitable? On a long enough timeline, if the UFC never came about, or all of the previous organizations, Pride and Vale Tudo in Brazil didn't come about, because MMA was sort of born out of the creation of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It was the Gracies were one of the founders of the UFC and popularized it. And if none of that had happened, would MMA through some other avenue be created? Almost like if humans had never evolved, if during one of the great extinction events all primates were knocked out, would the internet still be evolved? But except the internet would have been created by crow, an advanced crow civilization in another 3 million years.
Well, Daniel,
it's one of those interesting things. Like
it took 29 minutes and 1 second, but I'll tell you what, this is what I came for. This is what I came for. I wanted to have this conversation. You bring up
crow
such
civilization.
Is it destiny that MMA exists, or
yeah, exactly?
Would it have been a dodo bird popular? No, but you think back to, so right now I'm reading the Iliad, which I'm sure you've read probably a million times, right? And I just read through the Enemy at the Gates book of the 12 books that are in the book. And it's Robert Fagel's translation of Virgil's Iliad. And it is a spectacular translation of this battle, right? And I'm reading it and I'm like, like Christopher Nolan's not putting out movies that are this captivating with the gore that I'm reading right now. I mean, it is like, for a book, especially a book then, it is super, super violent. And it's violent in this very poetic, beautiful way where they're interspersing gods and humans constantly, so you never really know exactly where you stand. But I'm like, wow, this is a book written so long ago that just totally idolizes violence in an artistic way. Then you think of Gladiators and the Colosseum, and how that right, is the genesis of all things MMA way, way long ago. And you do wonder, you ask yourself, you go, is this kind of just, is that always in us? Are we always going to be, and because we definitely have been, despite our moral conflictions with it, drawn towards violence? And the UFC, MMA, and where it's at right now, it kind of gives you the most PG-13, morally acceptable version of you being able to watch that on full display and not feel like a sociopath while you do it.
Yeah, and that's true. I got saying that, I almost, I certainly kind of misspoke earlier, saying that this is the first time, but of course I'm only talking in sort of modern history and in what we would call in the modern world sporting events. But of course, fighting in its purest form has existed as a sport. You go back to gladiatorial times and pancration, anything goes. And that was a precursor to MMA. If you put two pancration fighters inside of an octagon with gloves, you would say that you were watching an MMA fight. It would probably kind of be a little bit different. There are a few interesting rules. Here, I'll tell you something. A little interesting rule about the Gladiators. I believe this to be true, but as with anything, you should fact check me. But I believe this to be true.
It, so you're good. You're going to sound smart.
And it almost annoys me a little bit that this is the case, because something that I hate is the power slap. Okay,
dude.
Now I've never met anyone.
Thank you, Daniel.
I've never met anyone who doesn't hate power slap. Okay, and the fact that the UFC are leaning so hard into it, it's just horrendous. If you think that MMA is bad, power slap is terrible. But back in the day, when there was a pancration fight and they were unable, these matches would sometimes go on for days, but occasionally they would have a time limit, be it a day or 2 days, whatever. And if they couldn't find a winner, the way they would settle it would essentially be power slap. They would take turns, not defending a strike, and they'd go back and forth until someone was done.
I hate it.
Just don't let Dana White hear that, because he'll jump on that straight away. But I do have a book about sort of ancient Roman sport, and I believe that was the case. Yeah, that if they couldn't settle the MMA fight, so you could be like, you do five 5-minute rounds of MMA, and if there's no winner by the end of it, you just go slap for slap, power slap style.
What do you think about no time limit? Well, there's so much to talk about here, so I don't want to lose us too much in the weeds. But I am curious.
Yeah.
What do you think about no time limit mixed martial arts? No
Yeah, it's
rounds,
great,
no
isn't
time
it?
limit.
Yeah, I mean the problem. Look, if you want to talk about purity, no rounds, no time limits, or rounds and time limits. I think no rounds, no time limits. We've seen all of these. For those who are newer spectators to MMA, they won't have seen this. But in Pride, we had no rounds, no time limits. There were multiple matches of no rounds, no time limits that went on for hours. In Pride, in an arena. I think Roger Gracie had one in maybe Pride 2 or 3. Of course, one of the most legendary fights back in the old school was Roger Gracie versus Kazushi
Sakuraba, yeah.
which was rounds. It was 5-minute rounds, but it was 5-minute rounds until there is a winner. And of course, after about 90 minutes, I believe it was, the Gracie corner throwing the towel. So we've seen it happen, and I actually think I prefer no time limit, but with rounds, because it breaks up. Sometimes you could, you imagine you're fighting for an hour. There's no fight that exists for an hour that is entertaining. And it just becomes sort of a battle of attrition. But if neither of the person is doing anything, you can kind of just both wait there. But in theory, if you want to find out who's the best fighter, that is the purest form to do it. And we've seen it in grappling as well. No time limit grappling matches. But again, unless they're often very, very boring. So as a spectator sport,
I think in
let's
grappling. Go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
I think in grappling, you need rules around it. You need to push people to advance and submit, because there's, as a sport where you're investing in production and to get people to watch, right? That's why they're streaming it, and they're charging for the memberships, and they have camera crews. It's not so that the fans can hear things better. It's because they're trying to get viewers. And if you want viewers, you need to keep it exciting. And I think the Fight to Win rule set's pretty good. ADCC is doing a pretty decent job of keeping things exciting. But you have to have that, because the most exciting thing that can happen is a submission. And that's exciting to the degree that you understand submissions, right? If you've not ever fought for 5 minutes to secure a rear naked choke, when you see it happen, it's impressive, but maybe not as impressive as if you're training. Whereas, again, if you watch someone knocked out, you don't even have to have been punched to get that's exciting. So I think where I wish that Leon Edwards and Nate Diaz would have had infinity more rounds to keep striking at each other, I think that it's important in grappling to have that corral.
The thing
intensity.
is, I do get that, but the thing is, when you go no time limit in MMA, by the time you get 30, 40 minutes in, those punches aren't doing anything, and they're not even really throwing them. So on a long enough time scale, even an MMA fight isn't going to be an MMA fight anymore. And I mean, you're talking about it, yes. Basically in theory, if two grapplers were beefing, or two MMA guys were beefing, and they really wanted to settle it, that's how you do it. You have a no time limit, no rules match. You have a straightener. You have a proper straightener. But of course, it doesn't work in the context of entertainment, which is what MMA and grappling is, and all sport is. And that's how pro wrestling, as we know it today, came about. Professional wrestling, scripted, choreographed wrestling, that came about because back when there were actual real wrestlers that would compete against each other, it was too boring. So what they would do instead is you meet up in the week prior to your match, and you have your proper match, no time limit, who's going to win, pin or submission or quitting or whatever. And then whoever won that was the guy who wins the scripted match on Saturday in front of the crowd. So you still got your winner-loser is real,
right,
but you're taking whoever won and you're then making a more exciting match. And that was the origin of scripted professional wrestling.
What do you think exists in the margin for improvement for grappling? We're looking at ADCC 2024 is going to be probably the biggest grappling event that we see this year, let alone, I mean, depending on how well it does, the past, I don't know, several 20 years or something. It's going to be huge. The tickets are already sold out. It's at an arena. The cast is stacked. The trials are selling out in every place that they're holding them. You're having really exciting matches leading up to it. Let's assume that ADCC is just a success in terms of numbers and viewers and attendees over 2022. How do you think that grappling can still improve, continue to draw in more people and stay exciting?
I don't think ADCC draws in any people who don't already watch grappling. And here's the other thing. We are very lucky as grapplers. We are very lucky. If we want to talk about appreciating things, maybe that's the overarching theme of today is appreciation. Here's another thing that we need to appreciate. We need to appreciate that Henzo and some of the other Gracies and some of the other top grapplers at the time went over to the Emirates and to Abu Dhabi and befriended some very, very wealthy people. Okay? We need to appreciate that. Because for that reason, we have an event called the Abu Dhabi Combat Championship, which is the biggest grappling event in the world and is funded by billionaires, which means that every single event loses millions of dollars.
They're taking an L. Yeah. That's so
that
true.
is not, it's not a profitable venture. So huge amounts of money, you know, Mo Jassim, who ran the last one, I believe, lost a couple of $1 million putting on that event. And yes, they put on what was the biggest spectacle. Look at ADCC from 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Yeah, pretty rough.
Right? It's crazy.
You have some banners printed out at the local computer store, right? And I
compared to ADCC 2000 and compared to ADCC in 2011. Yeah. It was nothing compared to what it is now. It's like a completely different sport. So you've got to give it to these guys, guys like Mo. We're very lucky to have Mo in the sport, who's continuing on that legacy and bringing that professionalism. But ultimately, this isn't the NFL. This isn't the Football Association. This isn't a massive organization that is hugely profitable from the sport. So, you know, it's almost virtual reality. It's not real. The success of events like ADCC is great for the sport, and it will get more viewers, but it's not going to suddenly go mainstream. What I think the sport needs, the events that I believe actually is going to take the sport to the next level, is events like Quintet. It's team events. I feel like Quintet has the most. Yeah, I think Quintet has the most watchability when it's good, you know, and it very often is. But Quintet is sort of the only event that I ever competed in, and when I talk to people about it, they go, "My girlfriend, she's never watched it before, but she was watching it. She loved it because it's so the narrative. It's very easy to follow because here's what we have. We've already spoken about this, so I won't reiterate this point much more. But grappling has an issue with a barrier to entry and a barrier to understanding, which is why it's never going to be a massive spectator sport. So if people who don't participate can't understand the sport's technicalities, you need to sell them on something else. You can't sell them on the grappling. You have to sell them on something else. So what do you sell them on? You sell them on the narrative outside of it, where it doesn't matter what happens in the match because you're excited to see that guy go against this big guy because he just beat that big guy, and then this team's mate lost and this guy's going to avenge him. And that's how you get people really interested in the sport without them being interested in the sport, right?
So Wagner last week was on the show and he said the same thing. He said that if you can play into this, it's almost like playing into nationalism. Like you give teams, whether it's nation-based teams, so it's like Team USA versus Team UK or whatever, or in the case of like AIGA, these sponsored teams with your favorite grapplers curated on them, it gives you something else to be interested in, which benefits both the practitioner but also the non-practitioner. Whereas if that element isn't there, it's tough to draw in the outsider.
Exactly. And then, so that's what you can do as an organization. And then the other thing, of course, is having big personalities within the sport. So love him or hate him, Gordon Ryan has been great for the sport because he's very well known outside of the sport. So people come to watch him in the sport.
Right.
Another great example is Craig Jones, who's getting more and more popular, who has kind of completely pivoted. Craig Jones, I was talking earlier in the episode about how important it is to look at yourself as a brand. Yeah. Craig Jones's recent last year and a half, 2 years, he's completely pivoted his entire brand. He's always been quite humorous and lighthearted, but he's realized that there's way more money in basically being entertaining and creating content that's entertaining and being funny than there is actually going and winning tournaments. So you see Craig now is not competing as seriously as he was 3 or 4 years ago, but is a way bigger name and people are way more interested in him. And yes, you can't, younger grapplers who are up and coming grapplers who are listening to this, you can't be Craig Jones because he's a very unique individual. He's very funny. He's got the perfect personality. And you can't necessarily do that, but it's the concept of trying to build your brand outside of just what you're doing on the competition stage.
But there's something that...
And then you've got to back it up with the competition stage, right?
So that's exactly what I was going to say. And I think something that I hold you to as well is like, you know, you can put out incredible content about strength and conditioning and grip training, and you can be funny and you can host stuff. But at the end of the day, when you boil it down, both you and Craig Jones are accomplished world-class competitors who competed and excelled on the highest stages that exist. So you can't put the chariot before the horse in these instances. Yeah. And I think that's going to be something that you see a lot of up-and-comers struggle with, is like, when is too soon to lean into who you really are and forego the accomplishment? Because that's a really important part. You think they should do it sooner.
You can do them both. Yep, straight away. Because you get better at anything that you practice. So if you wait to win ADCC trials before you start putting any content out, before you start trying to interact, before you start trying to get your name out there at all, people are just going to go, who's that guy? Oh, I guess he's just some grappler from
that's a good point.
Where, So, and it does. I'm not talking about you sit down with your social media strategist and you come up with a 10-step plan on what you're going to be doing. I'm not talking about that.
5 tips.
But maybe that's not a bad idea, right?
Right.
But it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. But just to be in that mindset, to understand, and I guess I guess what you're saying is, don't focus on your personal brand instead of focusing on being a great competitor.
Exactly.
But I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think you can do both because look, how many hours a day can you actually train? And you don't need to make funny videos
keep training
or do
too, right?
Yeah, how many hours a day can you actually train? It's the stuff in between. It's video your training sessions, put them online. It's film a couple instructionals when you teach that class that you teach every Tuesday at the gym around the corner. It's simple stuff. Look, I'll give you another piece of advice. I'll give you what I believe might be. I was planning on doing like a big post at some point in the future about this, but I'll say it here.
You've destroyed that. I believe now you're just going to air it out on the Main Idea podcast. I love it. Go for it.
Exactly. Look, one of the best things that you can do, if you start looking at yourself as more than just a pure competitor, even if you just want to be a competitor, if you look at yourself as more of that and you get into that mindset, you start acting differently. And for me, what I believe was one of them, and I may be wrong here, but I don't believe I am, and I hope I'm not, was
a
that
humble caveat.
From very young, I was always trying to build relationships with people within the sport. I was always trying to be friendly with people. I would, and I'm talking when I'm 6. Genuinely. I'm not. Yeah. It's not nothing. I'm just trying
not
to.
Like so that you could get something.
No, not at all. Not at all. I just want to. When I was 16, 17, 18, and I'm a blue belt at these tournaments, I'm going to go and say hello to this guy. Oh, it's great to see you again, blah, blah, blah. And you start to build relationships, people, instead of you go into the corner, you put your headphones on, you put your hoodie up, you sit there, you go and compete, you fuck off home. And if you just do that, yeah, cool. You'd be in a pro grappler and that's nothing else. But when you go to these places and you say hello to everyone and you're nice to people and you smile at people and they ask you a question and you give them an answer and you give time to people, it's sort of a karmic response that you get back. So for the first few years that I was on the scene, and I'm trying to just be pleasant and smile and chat to and make time for everyone. And then when I've advertised that I want to do my first seminar tour, who's going to be the first couple of people that give me an opportunity to teach at their gym?
Right.
They're going to be people that I've developed a bit of a relationship with in person, right? So this is something that requires no money, no resources, no cameramen, no knowledge at all, which is just to try and develop relationships within the space that you want to excel in, because that's essentially what you're doing. Social media is about generating relationships with strangers that you'll never meet, maybe. And you can do that, but maybe that takes a bit of time, that you've got to film stuff and do stuff like that. But if you're going to be in a room with 500 people who do jiu-jitsu, say hello to some of them. Start to develop some relationships with them, because you never know whether that person over there who overheard you being really nice to this guy sees that you're doing a seminar at the local gym and they go to visit you. And then they have a really good experience at your gym because you were friendly to everyone at the seminar, and they go back to their gym and go, Dan had a really nice seminar. You know, I had a really nice experience. Let's get him over there. So I genuinely believe doing stuff like this, and that's not anything that's, you're not going to the British Open to network, right?
Right.
But whilst you're there anyway, coaching or competing, be smiley, be happy, be as charming as you can, and try and build relationships with people. It's a really, really, really important thing, I believe.
Well, and to reiterate a point that you made earlier is you practice, you get better at what you practice at, right? So if charisma is something of value, I think, any big personality has a level of inherent charisma, and then probably charisma that was developed through opportunities like this, right? Every time you put yourself outside 100%. Your comfort zone, introduce yourself to someone you don't know, reach out via social media to someone you don't know, connect dots, introduce people, whatever you're doing, you are developing a skill set too. And at some point in the future, whether it's because Cage Warriors calls and they need an announcer who understands the sport, you never know when that return will come. But if it's never developed, because again, the hoodie with the earphones is a great example, because it's such like that's such a caricature.
It's a jiu-jitsu thing, right?
It's like such a jiu-jitsu caricature. You're investing your time in one or the other. And in a sport that does not lend itself to abundant finances and, covering all your bases for life, it's a zero cost effort that you can put forward. It's a really good point.
Yeah, I'll give you one more example, and I won't get super specific just for sort of privacy reasons. But I was given a fantastic opportunity a few years back for some work, some coaching, that was just a great opportunity, great experience, and lucrative. And I was given that through a show that I competed on, and it was a tournament. There were lots of people competing on the show, and they picked me. And the only reason they gave my name to the individual who asked them was because I came across as the most friendly person of the bunch of all the competitors. That was the only reason. Because and I wasn't trying to be nice because I thought this individual who was helping run this show was connected to anything else.
Right.
But I was just pleasant to them, because be pleasant to everyone. And you don't know who's going to go, oh, we've got this opportunity. They're asking for someone. Dan was really cool with me. I'm going to be the first one he's going to be the first one that I reach out to. And this is true. I'm commentating on a show this weekend. I'll give more advice.
Please.
This tournament is just going to be advice for if you're not like an up and coming grappler who wants to be a professional grappler, this podcast is going to be completely worthless to you. But maybe you know someone who is, and you can pass the advice on. I'll give you another piece of advice. There are lots of shows coming onto the scene now, and obviously I work for Polaris, and I work for a women's only show called Enyo and Cage Warriors. But let's ignore Cage Warriors. I'm talking more about grapplers here. You want to get on a big show, right? Okay, so first thing you got to do, again, If you've built some relationships with some people, then they might have a better chance of inviting you onto the show. If you were nice to this guy, you might not even know this guy is this guy's the matchmaker from Polaris. You didn't even know. And he thinks of you next time he's looking for a person your weight and experience.
Right.
But once you get that opportunity, if you want to, let's say you get on Polaris prelims and you want to keep coming back on Polaris, regardless of whether you win or lose. Whether you win or lose does not matter that as much as you think it is. It's the rapport and the relationship that you've built in with the organization. So things like, I'm writing some notes for the event this weekend. We send out some questionnaires for the competitors to answer that's going to advise my commentary a little bit. So when they're walking out, I can say, they're from this gym, they've accomplished this, this, and this. Some people write this much. One word answers and this is the majority. One word answers. And some of these people, and then some other people have written out an entire page. Now, firstly, in this particular example, this is the information that you're giving me to try and sell you to the people watching at home. But let's forget about that. I'm going to look at this person and go, this person is enthusiastic to be here. They've taken time and effort into helping me do my job to help them. And then other stuff like some of the girls, or some of the competitors, when they do this, you send out the questionnaire, it's back within a day, 2 days, 3 days. Others, it's 2 days before the event. They've had the questionnaire for 2 months and you're chasing them up and they still haven't done it. All of these things, sending in a high quality photo as soon as they ask. Hey, we need a high quality photo of you. I've already got one ready to go. You send it to them straight away. They message you. They ask you to sign the contract. You don't wait 3 days to sign the contract. You get it back to them straight away. All of these things is going to make you seem like a more appealing prospect the next time someone's looking for someone that you fit the bill, an opportunity that you fit the bill for. All of these things. And if you only look at yourself as a competitor, I do jiu-jitsu. I compete in jiu-jitsu. I'm a killer on the mat. I'm going to win ADCC gold one day. I'm going to go down as the greatest competitor this country's ever seen. If that is your attitude and you go, they've sent me a questionnaire. I don't do questionnaires. I don't do interviews. I do grappling. I'm going to forget about that. I've got training to go to. Oh, can we get the contract signed back? I'm busy. I'm eating. I'm sleeping. I'm napping. I'm training. I forget about it. All of these things are actually going to take away from some of the opportunities that you might find in the sport. So it's just little things like this. Try and be a good, not a person, but try and be someone that people want to work with, and it's more likely that people want to work with you.
Yeah, it's so funny. It seems like such basic human.
It is. Isn't
if
it?
you were just drawing up basic pre-existing human requirements to function in a society where we're connected to each other, right? Not to stand on a soapbox and gripe, so I'm going to give myself a cap on this, but just in the world of outreach and booking, right, for a show, which I will conduct largely myself on this, it blows my mind how common, and this is, I think this is one of the number one reasons why people quit podcasting, how many times, and I've lost count, that it will be studio set up, lit, ready to go. Person doesn't show up. Person doesn't reach out. And there's not only is there a, hey, something came up, a schedule conflict, can we do another day? It was, reached out, confirmed, emailed, confirmed, added to the calendar, verified that it was added to the calendar, on both calendars, you're ready to go, and they're not there. And there's not even a semblance of human decency to say, hey, I'm not going to be there, which I get it. Look, when you're developing something, this stuff's going to happen. And if it deters you, then it's not the right industry. Just like if those kind of things perturb you, right? But it's just kind of crazy. You're like, wow, whenever would you get something like a questionnaire from someone and just backlog it? Like it just never existed, right? It's just not something you would do. It's so mind-blowing that people get through life treating these basic things that way. And that has to be such a conflict for people. This, like, I'm the grappler. It makes total sense to me, right? Because that's a mentality. You're a competitor. You want to be the best. But the other part that's missing is it's a show. It isn't a round robin, all people enter tournament. It's a show. Shows are produced. And when you produce things, you manage relationships. And it means a lot when someone is timely and they're in your inbox when you ask them to. And then you do the next Quintet or the next Polaris. What do you want? Obviously, great grapplers, but what's like the next best thing you want? It's good communication, people that respond, that are on board, that make your job easier because you're already juggling 60 freaking knives. So that is advice that could be, I mean, heated across many industries, right?
It's certainly, I mean, it's good advice for all the advice that I'm giving for grapplers would be good advice for any industry at all, which is like, be charming with people as much as you can, be friendly to people, try and build relationships in person, online, you know, try and increase your profile, answer people back, be punctual. These are all super simple things. But I feel like the difference is that there's no culture of professionalism within grappling because it's not a professional sport. This is what people need to understand. It's not a professional sport. We can call Polaris pro grappling and all of these other shows pro grappling because they pay, but what does professional mean? You can make a living off of it. And no one's making a living off of pure grappling shows. You need the other stuff around it, which means that if you want to be a professional grappler, that doesn't mean you compete at ADCC trials and ADCC and Europeans and IBJJF Worlds and Polaris and Grapplefest. Because when you look at your bank account, you're going to realize that you spent more money to compete than you got in return of it, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, it's so true. That's the most important mindset shift. We've done zero justice to my original question about building the perfect grappler, but in turn have actually delivered.
I disagree. I disagree.
Yeah,
I think we've actually, it's not the answer you expected, but we've found some insight into how to be the perfect grappler.
If I had an animator who was like drawing this up as we were going through, what you thought you were going to get is like this Greco-Roman cut from stone, Herculean looking guy. And what you got is like a very modest, suit and tie with a nice watch on. He's got his calendar. Everything's all like scheduled. He's very polite to people, but he's not trying to get anything from them. It's funny.
Exactly.
But you know what? Maybe that juxtaposition is actually what people need, is in it for a sport that's going to continue to grow, you know, fingers crossed, as enthusiasts and fans. And for people that are listening that are aspiring, these are important things. And they're not coming from someone who read a book on grappling. It's coming from someone who currently lives and lived at the highest levels of competition, who's also savvy in creating things. I mean, you're no stranger to coming up with concepts and marketing them and getting them out to people and doing it in an authentic way. It's very, it's refreshing because I think in the creator world, creator economy, to use my least favorite word, it's just rife with bullshit. It really is.
Yeah.
And so to see someone who's actually like taking time and being patient and putting out things that matter, that they would actually put their name on and literally do, it's advice worth considering, that if you implement anything that you had just said, you're not going to do yourself a disservice. You're going to help yourself.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah, nothing bad could come. And, you know, I will reiterate, like myself as an example, I don't do anything to try and, like, I haven't, you know what stuff would like boost your social media, and you know what stuff would do this and do that and all of this marketing stuff. And I'm guilty, if anything, for not doing those things. I find it very hard to do anything. I have like a very, very strong block against doing anything that is inauthentic to myself. So the last like just under a year, I've been working with a marketing agency who took over selling my online courses, and they send me through copy to check over, and I have to rewrite everything because I'm like, I do not sound like that. I'm not gonna, and it hurts me. And the more you do it, you kind of get a little bit more used to it. But apart from that, everything else I put out is my own stuff, and I'm not doing TikTok dances or trends or stuff like that. And I think that's the block that a lot of people get, which is I don't want to do social media because I don't want to do all of the cringy shit. No, that's not what it's about. That's not what I've done. All I've done, basically, is I've taken videos of myself doing the training that I do, and I put them online. That's it. Like, my entire social media has been built on just me doing the stuff that I was doing anyway, except I filmed it and I put it online.
What's not
And
cringy
that's
about a
what you
man
have.
in Daisy Dukes lifting a lead trash can over his...
Exactly. The fact that the stuff I do is weird and I dress weird and I act weird, that's just a happy coincidence, you know. And but that's all it takes for people, and that's with everything. That's with the podcast. That's with commentating. That's with teaching. That's with everything. You just got to be yourself, but you've got to let other people see yourself, because you can be great. And many people out there are great, but if you're not putting it out there, no one will know that you're great. And that doesn't mean pretend to be someone else who's greater, because you will not be able to do that. The only person that you can be is yourself, but make sure that other people at least have the opportunity to see who you are and develop those relationships with people.
Well, I think in your case too, and this is something that I've grown to appreciate in different creators, and I try my best, although it's difficult to emulate, is you're okay with this taking a long time. And that's a very, very crucial part of being someone who creates things. Is if you're Daniel Strauss in your garage going, I need the most, I need the most followers in the world so I can leverage my business. And like this has to grow. It's not growing fast enough. I need to grow. If your goal becomes grow, you'll do what the marketing agency says. And you might even get growth in the short term. But what you're going to get is a very confused group of people trying to understand who you are. But what you get instead is maybe a longer timeline of growth. But in that fits a podcast that is you, programs and instructionals that are you, speaking opportunities that are you. And so it kind of grows like that instead. And it takes longer. So if you don't have endurance, and if you don't have patience, it's a really brutal industry to try to live in, or form of business to live in. But if you're okay with that, it's really special, because every single person who finds your page and engages with it, they're like you, or they're like that other person that told them about it. And that's a much, much, much stronger form of growth, so that when you put something out, they want to know about it. You release a podcast with a banjo player, and then they don't look at it and go, a banjo player. They go, wow, Daniel talked to a banjo? I bet this is kind of interesting. Like, of all the people talking to a banjo player in this band, I bet a grappler talking to a banjo player who's super fucking strong, that's probably the best conversation with the banjo player that I can hear, right? But that's because they're all, they're there for it, and it's because you're patient with it. You've taken time to do it right and do it your way, and it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, and one thing, like you said, just one thing there, which is the audience ends up being confused, but more importantly, the creator ends up being confused because they're playing a part that they aren't even. And that's, you're right. It does take a long time. I've been posting on Instagram for many, many years, probably over 10 years now. And obviously the scope of Instagram has changed most, but it's a long play, and you just got to be patient. And it's just like jiu-jitsu. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the things that jiu-jitsu teaches you. It's one of the things that strength training teaches you. You can't come into this TikTok age now. What people want is they want that one video that's going to go viral and blow them up. That's all they want. They want that. I just wanted one video that's going to make me a superstar overnight. But when you train jiu-jitsu for a long time, or when you lifted weights for a long time, you know that nothing happens overnight. Nothing's going to be quick. It's always a big, long, consistent goal. It's not about where I'm going to be. How many followers are you going to have in 6 months? It's how many followers are you going to have in 6 years? Because guess what? 6 years are going to pass anyway, right?
Yeah,
in 6 years' time, 6 years will have passed anyway. So you might as well be doing the thing for those 6 years, or for those 10 years, or for those 20 years.
Yeah, it's the enjoying the training hall, right? Being in there. That if you're not enjoying that part of it, and all you're thinking about is getting a black belt, then when that happens, you're going to have a whole nother problem of figuring out who the hell you are, because that's all you've been focusing on for your whole life, right? Instead of appreciating the time in between.
100%.
I need to ask you this before we go, and I think you've definitely earned yourself another visit on the show, because there's too many things that we did not talk about at all.
I like coming on your show.
Yeah,
because,
it's fun.
Because we did all the normal questions in the first one, so you get more interesting stuff.
That's right. No, this is good. And it will only get, with patience and time, right? It's only going to get better. We're going to understand. how the hell do you bend a horseshoe? I've watched videos of you do this. It sparked me to go, I should be able to bend a horseshoe, and then look up videos and discover, kind of like when I discovered that there's still large full-scale night battles that you can watch on YouTube. I'm sure you've seen plenty of this.
There's a whole little niche
Dude,
sport of them.
That's we're going to do a whole episode on that one time. That is insane. Insane. But for another time. But I've discovered not only is horseshoe bending itself a thing and a skill that goes beyond just strength, which I think when you watch someone tear a phone book or split a deck of cards or bend a horseshoe, the first thing you think in your head is that person's really strong, which is probably true in all cases, but not the defining factor. I also discovered that there's a community online of people that just bend horseshoes. And within that community, there are rankings for different horseshoe types and stress levels and styles. And there's beginner horseshoes that you need to start with, and there's certain techniques. And it just... it nuked my world of just thinking that this is some fringe thing that has no nothing behind it. Some cowboy somewhere was discovered one day on accident and bent one and was like, oh, I bet I can do that again. How did you come into horseshoe bending, and what is the best place to start for an aspiring bender like myself?
Yeah. So I haven't bent horseshoes in years, and I was thinking about it this week. Just because we had this conversation, tomorrow I'm going to try and see if I have any horseshoes laying around. I'm going to try and bend a horseshoe tomorrow just because of this conversation. But I got into horseshoe bending because, so bending steel, horseshoes, or nails.
That is the best. That is the best start to a sentence I've ever heard. I got into horseshoe bending because. Okay, continue. Excellent. Yes.
So bending steel is it's one of the many old time strongman feats of strength, right?
Right.
So some of the iconic
circus
ones,
strongman,
like circus strongman. So circus strongman or old time strongman, is kind of what got me into strength training full stop, because a lot of these strongman back in the day, when you think of strongman today, you think of the world's strongest men. So this is a tournament, they're competitive strongman, it is a test of strength, and the world's strongest man happens every year, and there's some other ones like the Arnolds and the Giants' Lives, and it's a sport. But back in the day, strongman was not a sport, it was a type of performance. And professional strongmen would fill arenas. There were no TVs. It was a form of entertainment, just like grappling is today. And they would go on stage and they would perform feats of strength. They would lift a barbell, or they would lift a person. They would bend steel. They would break chains. They would hammer nails, punch nails into wooden boards. They'd do loads of crazy shit. They'd tear cards. They'd bend horseshoes. Eugene Sandow fought a tiger. Okay. Crazy shit.
A drugged up tiger.
Crazy shit. Or a lion. It was a tiger or a lion. There's a great story in one of his books about Eugene Sandow fighting a lion, and he said he had a rehearsal a few days beforehand, and he basically had this absolute barn burner with this lion, and the lion was gloved, so he didn't have his claws, but even then the claws kind of got through. And Sandow fights this lion and has this absolute battle, and he's fucking torn to pieces. And I think in the end, the way he gets him is he turns his back to him, and as the lion jumps on him, he sort of grabs him and slams him over his shoulder, and the lion becomes submissive to him. And that was like the first battle. So then when it comes to do the performance, he's thinking, Jesus Christ, I cannot go through that same that same war. I'm torn to pieces. I barely survived that. I don't want to go through that again. But anyway, they've got this big spectacle that they have to do. He has to fight the lion, and they bring the lion out, and Sandow gets in the cage, and the lion is completely submissive.
Wow.
Because he's already had the fight, and now he's submissive to him. So the head's down. He does not want to fight. So Sandow's pulling his tail and kicking him, and he's trying to egg him on, and this lion will not he won't go anywhere near him. So I believe in the end he picks him up onto his shoulders and he carries him round the stage instead, and of course the crowd go wild. But imagine seeing that. That is some entertainment. That I think is what we really need to bring back is performing strongman.
ADCC
But
2024 sidebar performance. Daniel Strauss bends horseshoes.
Carries a line. What are you talking
about? You could have Khabib wrestle the bear. You could do a lion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now we got.
they're a spectacle. Now we got an event. Finally, we got. That's going to appeal to the mainstream. One of the feats that they would do, they would tear cards, they would bend nails, and they would bend horseshoes, and so that was basically how I got into it. When I got into training, I was very fascinated by old time strongmen and the way that they trained, and then the feats of strength that they did. So I remember one day telling my friend I want to learn how to tear a deck of cards. So I got into card tearing and learned how to do that, and then I wanted to get into nail bending, and I got into that and eventually certified. There are certifications that you can do where you bend specific nails. You bend specific nails in front of a judge, and then you get a certificate and your name on the website and stuff like this. It's crazy. And then another one of the niches within the niche of still bending is horseshoe bending. So how do you get in the horseshoe bending? You get some horseshoes, you get some suede wraps to protect your hands, and you start bending them, and you try and learn the technique, and you try and develop it.
You just go for it and find out what your starting point is, or
no? There is technique.
I guess
to
my
it.
starting point would be 0, right?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about here, if you want sort of the connection to everything else, the reason why I wear jeans, the sort of whole brand about the jeans thing, it actually started with the horseshoes. I never used to wear jeans to training. I would wear tracksuit bottoms or shorts or same shit that everyone else wore. And when I got into so horseshoe bending is a form of bending called a braced bend. So you have unbraced bending, where you bend something without it touching your body
in space.
So let's say I bend a nail like this in space. It can be sometimes under the neck, but you're not using your body as a fulcrum. And then you have a brace bending, where you might bend something over your knee or over your thigh. And horseshoe bending is a form of brace bending. You can bend a horseshoe unbraced, but it's very, very difficult. You need a very light shoe. But proper horseshoe bending for heavy horseshoes, you basically place on the outside of your thigh, and then you push one leg and you pull the other leg to pull it open. Hopefully my laptop battery doesn't die anytime soon, but if I do cut out, that's why. So you push and you pull to open it up, and you want a little bit of padding, and you want nice friction on the outside of your leg. So what's the best material? Denim. So I started training in denim when I was bending horseshoes a lot. I actually bent a horseshoe at my brother's wedding.
Steal the show. What an asshole.
Yeah, I know. He wanted me to do it. I wasn't going to do it. And then like the week beforehand, he said, no, I want you to do it. Because if you take a horseshoe, you bend it from a U. You kind of bend it from a U and you flatten it into an S. But then if you keep going further, you end up bending it into a heart shape. So he said, I want you to bend a horseshoe into a heart at the wedding. So of course, under my suit, after I do I do a
You're
reading.
Never nude.
I had my cut off jeans under my suit trousers.
Wait, are you familiar with Arrested Development?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So you know it.
I am definitely.
So you are actually living
of course.
Tobias.
I am a live. Yeah, exactly. So horseshoe bending, and it's super fun. You do end up to begin with some nice big welts on your leg, and I'm going to find a horseshoe and I'm going to bend it tomorrow just for you.
Well, I'm going to find a horseshoe and I'm going to start. I'm going to get going on it. You
just got to get some. You get some wraps, wrap them around the handle, and you can buy instructionals about how to bend horseshoes. You can find some videos online.
I need to be able to do this. You
can learn to do it.
Yeah.
You get some light enough horseshoes, and you learn the technique. You can do it.
Final closing thought here. This is so random, and I meant to open with this, but I completely spaced. I had a dream about you last night. This was very, very strange because obviously
that's what we want to do.
Podcast today. But
yeah.
Here's the dream was we were in like some sort of like I think when I was reading about this, I was going to ask you about it, yoga originally. And so I read about the retreat that you did. So I was thinking about yoga. So we were in like Bali, and I had came upon you in like the kind of hotel bar area. And I don't know if I was like asking you if you were ready to do the show or if there was an event. It was like kind of cloudy, but you were really like in a really pessimistic mood. And you told me that you gave up you said, I'm done. I'm not even talking about grappling. So I was kind of like, oh, well, we can't even talk about grappling on the show. And you had in place, you said, and I fucking love cigarettes. And you had picking up chain smoking cigarettes. And so I'm here. This is so real. I'm here in this like
hopefully
hotel.
this wasn't a premonition. Yeah. Premonition
and I was
for the
like,
future.
I was trying to console you about basically trying to get you to see that like chain smoking was not the answer to your absence of grappling. It was so strange. And there's no like end to the story. I mean, that was basically it, is that I was like, stuck in this hotel lobby. You chain smoked cigarettes. You refused to talk about grappling. So I meant to, I meant to open with it to just wellness check on you. That you are not indeed chain smoking cigarettes in absence of jiu-jitsu.
I've never smoked. Yeah, I've never smoked a cigarette, so we're all good there. But hopefully that's not a sign of things to come. But I'll let you know if I ever find myself chain smoking cigarettes, not talking about jiu-jitsu, I'll hit you up and you can pull me back into the real world.
Well, Daniel, we crushed it again. Definitely need to do another episode. There's too much to still talk about.
Mate.
But this
always a pleasure to chat with you.
episode was a blast. Yeah. Really appreciate you coming on. We'll do it again in the future, and in the future, I will have bent a horseshoe. That is my goal, and you can go through some sort of substance abuse anonymous for cigarette smoking and come clean. So I'll catch you on the next one.
We got to deal there. I'll catch you soon, brother. Great chatting as always.
Right,
take it easy.
Hey friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com. Join the mailing list and stay up to date on all things The Mayn Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.